So, when you walk past a warehouse, you probably just see, towering racks, dusty cardboard boxes, forklifts zipping around. It just looks like dry physical logistics, right? Well, what if I told you that warehouse is actually a vault? Today in this explainer, we're going to completely transform how you look at inventory management. We are turning those cardboard boxes into a high stakes narrative about guarding a company's locked up cash. Because honestly, how a business manages its materials from the stockroom all the way up to the boardroom, that literally dictates whether it thrives or goes totally bankrupt. To really understand the massive scale of this, just think about this number: 90%. For retailers and wholesalers, an astonishing 90% of their entire working capital isn't sitting safely in a bank account somewhere. It is physical inventory sitting on shelves. Even for manufacturing businesses, on average, two-thirds of their working capital is tied up in inventory. If you mismanage that, you are essentially setting fire to your own cash. Okay, let's dive into this a bit deeper. For most businesses, material costs eat up over 60% of their total operating costs. This perfectly cements our whole metaphor, right? Inventory is literally locked up cash. Controlling these material costs isn't just some tedious side job for the accounting department. It is absolutely vital for minimizing expenses and maximizing profits for the entire organization.
So here is our blueprint to the warehouse for today's explainer. First, we'll cover the stakes of storage. Second, sourcing and storing. Third, valuing your inventory. Fourth, the Goldilocks inventory levels. And finally, keeping perfect count.
All right, part one, the stakes of storage and why inventory actually matters. So the quality of service a business offers its customers and the ultimate value of its assets are severely affected by how effectively these physical items are managed. It's really no exaggeration to say that inventory management defines a company's ultimate success or failure. But we kind of need to clarify what we actually mean by inventory here. It isn't just those shiny finished products waiting for a customer. Inventory encompasses every single tangible material asset of an organization, aside from fixed assets. We are talking about raw materials, like cocoa or cassava. We're talking about work in progress on the factory floor. And crucially, it includes consumables, stationery, oil, factory grease, fuel, gas, even the packaging materials. Basically, if you can touch it and it's used to run the business, it's inventory. Moving on to part two, sourcing and storing. Getting it from a need onto the shelf. Now that we know what inventory actually is, we have to tackle the physical control of it. The very first major hurdle is getting the goods properly and then figuring out exactly where to put them so they don't get lost, stolen, or ruined. Chronologically, this whole purchasing function starts with originating a purchase requisition. This is just when someone in the company identifies a need and gets the green light. Next up is supplier selection, where you gather quotes and negotiate terms based on things like price, reliability, and transport costs. Step 3 is ordering, which is legally offering to buy under those negotiated terms using a purchase order. And finally, we have completing. This is the moment the items actually arrive, they get inspected against the order, and if everything matches up, a goods received note or GRN is generated. The goods are now officially in the system. Now, what's really interesting about this is that once they are in the system, where exactly do they go? A business has to make a huge strategic trade-off regarding storage layout. You can use centralized stores, which is essentially one massive warehouse. And that's great because it requires fewer staff, lowers administrative costs, and avoids duplicating items all over the place. But you face much higher transportation costs to get items to distant departments, and, worst case scenario, a single fire could destroy literally everything. On the flip side, you have decentralized stores, which place materials right in the user departments. This lowers your transport delays and minimizes that massive fire risk, but it definitely means duplicating costs, hiring way more staff, and dealing with a much more cumbersome counting process later on. Which brings us to part 3, valuing your inventory. This is the financial control piece. Okay, this is where we shift our narrative from physical cardboard boxes to the financial ledgers. Because as prices fluctuate over time, two identical items sitting right next to each other on a shelf can actually have wildly different values on paper. And it depends entirely on the accounting method you choose. We basically have two primary philosophies for pricing these items: FIFO and LIFO. FIFO, or first in, first out, assumes the oldest materials are used first. So older prices go into your production costs, which leaves your remaining inventory valued at the most recent, often higher, prices. LIFO, or last in, first out, flips this entirely. It assigns the newest prices to production, keeping those older prices in your inventory valuation. So think about it. During times of inflation, if you want your product costs to reflect current economic reality and maybe show lower profits to minimize your tax burdens, LIFO is the more conservative play. But if you want to show really high profits to your investors, FIFO is usually going to produce the greatest profit margin.
And let's ground this with some real math using Kofi Abrazi's secondhand shovel business. It brilliantly illustrates this exact concept. Just think about how drastically the reported profit changes here without a single physical shovel altering its shape. Under the FIFO method, his gross profit comes in at 1,030,000 CDs. But under the LIFO method, that profit jumps massively to 1,520,000 CDs. And the weighted average method sits right there in the middle at 1,258,300. Now, because his specific shovel costs were actually on a downward trend, LIFO in this rare case yielded a higher profit. But the main takeaway here is just immense. Simply changing the valuation method alters the reported gross profit by hundreds of thousands of CDs. All right, part 4, the Goldilocks inventory levels, time for mathematical control. Now that we understand the financial stakes, we're transitioning into the mathematical control of inventory. Management has to make decisions to minimize costs while making absolutely sure materials are always available. It is a very delicate balancing act of having not too much, not too little, but exactly the right amount. And to find that perfect balance, businesses rely on a mathematical formula called the economic order quantity, or EOQ. This is the ultimate tool used to optimize material costs. It calculates the exact optimum quantity of inventory that you should order each time an order is placed, specifically designed to minimize the opposing forces of holding costs and ordering costs. It's exactly how you protect that locked-up cash from bleeding away. So, the crucial point here is really understanding this cost balancing act. On one side, you have holding costs. These are things like rent, insurance, deterioration, and the interest on the capital you've tied up. Naturally, the more you hold, the higher these go. But on the other side, you have ordering costs, administrative work, transport, setup costs. If you order in tiny, frequent batches to save on holding costs, your ordering costs are going to skyrocket. And looming above both of these are stock-out costs. If you run completely dry, you face lost sales, idle factory time, furious customers, and a total loss of goodwill. The EOQ formula is what perfectly balances all of these competing financial pressures. Finally, part 5, keeping perfect count. The audit. So, we've sourced it, we've valued it, and we've mathematically optimized it. But honestly, none of that matters even a little bit if the reality on the warehouse floor doesn't match your spreadsheet. We conclude our structured journey by moving into the final stage, physically auditing and reconciling the warehouse records. There are 2 primary ways to physically count your materials. First is periodic inventory taking, which usually happens annually. It is less expensive overall, for sure, but it often requires shutting down operational activities or entire factories, causing massive disruptions. Plus, discrepancies might go totally unnoticed for a whole year. In contrast, continuous inventory taking means items are counted at frequent intervals on a random, rotational basis. Yes, it is more expensive to operate continuously, but it provides readily available, highly reliable balances all year long. And most importantly, this continuous checking serves as a major deterrent to theft and pilferage. Which brings us to our final question, a thought I want to leave you with today. Look at your own operations, or the businesses you analyze. Is that working capital truly working for you, or is it just gathering dust on a shelf somewhere? As we've seen throughout this explainer, from the moment a purchase is requisitioned to the final annual count, inventory is not just some logistical necessity, it is a financial powerhouse. Mastering these controls, valuing it right, ordering the exact EOQ, and auditing it rigorously, that is the hidden secret to total business profitability. Thank you so much for joining me, and I really hope this changes the way you look at the stockroom forever.